think I made a real conscious decision knowing that this was Amory's journey. This was his path, and it really didn't have much to do with me. Certainly there were things that I could have done maybe to have changed some of this, but really Amory was a grown adult and he had made his own choices. And one of those choices in this lifetime was not to deal with the shadows and not to get help and not to talk about his emotions and to hold everything in. And he chose that, and we had conversations about that. So as much as I wanted that to be different as a parent for him, it wasn't my choice.
Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community, and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time, and we're here with hope, love, and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can. So welcome everybody to our podcast today. We're very pleased, bittersweet as always, to have someone with us on the show, on the podcast, the episode this week. We're very welcoming of you, Kathy, here today, all the way from the Pacific Northwest in the USA. Long distance, so there may be a bit of pause between us speaking, obviously, because it's a long way, but we're going to do our best today to help you share your story, Kathy, because it's a long one, and I won't even start to introduce your relationship to suicide because it's been a long, complicated one by the sounds of it. So I'd love you just to introduce what that is for you and what brings you here today, really.
Yeah, good morning, and so thank you for having me. I was on a suicide loss support, they're called the Summit. And so it was a really, really helpful thing for me to have people start talking and conversing about this. I had grown up in a family where there was suicide loss since the age of 4. Mm-hmm. And pretty much, of course, back then they didn't talk about things like that. And we didn't get to talk about that and feel that. So my whole adult life, I continued to try to process what that meant about losing family members to suicide. And then recently, my son, Amory, at the age of 31, after sort of a domino effect, died by suicide. And in that scenario, I also lost my former husband, Amory's father. It was a homicide.
Oh, a long trajectory then, a long history since you were 4 until, is it April this year? So
yeah, April 2020. Yeah, right after the COVID started, which I think had a direct impact upon Amory's decision.
Wow. Okay. So Amory took your ex-husband, his father, with him when he went?
Yeah, he did.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I lost my dad when I was 4. He died by suicide. And then when I was in my pre-teenage years, his sister, my Annie, died by suicide. And then I had a brother. He had a very complicated history of drugs and self-abuse. He sits on the questionable. He did get in a motorcycle accident, but we had heard it might have been purposeful. But so that's kind of slash, didn't want to be here. Hard to know what to call that one.
Oh, God. How old were you then, or when was that?
I was 22. I had just moved to Colorado from upstate New York.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So your dad at 4, and then his sister, your auntie, when you were a teenager, and then your brother, questionable, but yeah, who knows, early 20s.
Right.
And that's it until your son and former husband now, 18 months ago.
Right.
Geez. Wow.
I had known people sort of like slash in the community, but not direct family members.
Okay.
So yeah, it has been a lot, and it really the impact of this didn't hit me until this year when my son died.
Okay.
Again, a lot of that was I dealt with through therapy, through transformational workshops, through breathwork, trying to figure out sort of what was wrong with me, why I was the way I was, never really addressing the significant impact of the loss of suicide.
Of course, yeah. When you've grown up with it and known no different, it's your life, isn't it? That was life. So you took it on yourself, that it was your problems, quote unquote, that took you to look for health, mental health, whether it's breathwork, yoga. You do yoga, don't you?
Yeah, those things have been very instrumental in my healing throughout the years. I look back and I say, wow, how did you make it through all of this?
Yeah.
And it really has been breath work, meditation, yoga, and key for me has been nature. nature has been the biggest piece in my personal healing.
Yeah. So just walking, being outside, is it?
This year in particular, I moved from Wisconsin. After it happened, I moved from Wisconsin to Washington, the state of Washington. So I am in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. It's one of the largest national forests. And I was renting an Airbnb on an overcliff overlooking the Columbia River in the Columbia Gorge. And it's sacred grounds here. So like all I could do is sometimes walk there and lay down flat on the ground and cry. And it was very healing. Eagles would fly over and make noises, butterflies, bees. I mean, the animals sort of all came around me, and just very tender. It was a really beautiful way for me to heal and be connected to the other critters on the planet. Sometimes they're better than humans.
They're certainly easier to understand than humans, aren't they? When you just look into an animal's eyes and just, very simple, aren't they? And that's like breath and yoga. It's actually the simple things in life that bring us the most peace, I think. And we sometimes as humans overcomplicate things, don't we? And just to bring it back to the breath is so simple and often overlooked, but so important. And nature.
I mean, I certainly always did namaste and always kind of touched myself when I was pregnant, but I never touched myself so much after the loss of my son. I mean, for months and months and months, I think my hands were glued to my heart. And partly that is because of the pain. I had such physical pain in my chest that the only comfort was to put my hands over my heart. And it just regulated me. That seemed to really kind of regulate the body. And not knowing sort of that it was a real thing, it really does regulate the body. It was just sort of an intuitive, put my hands on my heart.
Gosh. So there's the physical pain, which we were discussing before we started the podcast. Yeah, the physical pain of grief is, I think I felt a lot of shock. So I didn't tune into my body, but now I'm learning more and more about the body. And now I recognize if I get headaches from doing too much work with suicide grief or my research, I get the headaches. And I know I have to step away at that point and just heal without doing any of the doing work involved with research or making a change in the world. I step away and do my own. And that's kind of what your heart was, wasn't it? When you were touching yourself with your heart, in touching your chest and just self-care. It sounds like a lot of love, self-care.
I think so. Yeah, I started getting headaches right after my father died, very young. And then I became pretty sickly. I was the one that got sore throats and flus and colds and coughs. So my whole life has really been about looking at how illness, and I'm speaking for me, how illness is directly correlated to some of those unexpressed emotions. And so for me, I became very, very studious. I mean, I just decided that I was going to get perfect grades, and I was a really nervous, kind of introverted child. And I think I spent a lot of time up in my head. And I think that's why I had chronic headaches. I was just thinking about everything all the time and wasn't really feeling.
Went up into your head.
I did.
To work out, just who you were in the midst of everything else.
Have you noticed that in your journey? I see a lot of people now trying to understand and trying to figure it out, and we want answers, which is, I think, normal, especially in this particular situation. But for me, I found that none of that was helpful. It only hurt my head. It wasn't helpful until I started feeling my body and feeling what was going on in my body and what was I feeling.
Yeah, it's very well known now in therapy, in psychosomatic therapy, where we heal by going into the body instead of staying in the head. As humans, we've got a really powerful brain. It's just the way we are built. It's going to work really hard for us to protect us in order to survive in an intellectual society where we need our brain in order to survive and learn from our experiences and then think about what we've done in that experience in order to make ourselves better people, for want of a better word. We use our brain and we've made it such a powerful organ now and a powerful mechanism, but it can take over. It can get so powerful that we forget the body. And that's why yoga and all those breath work practices or meditation or mindfulness can just bring in the somatic sensations and that's a lot of where the trauma memories are. They're in our bodies because we react to trauma, whether it's the phone call or finding anybody or any of the process of grief, especially with suicide. The trauma involved, I think, is often overlooked. And the trauma of the absolute shock that comes with suicide is overlooked in psychology, and trauma is held in the body. So that's what a lot of therapy, psychosomatic therapy does. It integrates the mind and body, but also yoga and just practice like that. Your own practices can do that.
There's a lot more of that now, though, isn't there? I mean, I was able to, in a very small town, I was able to access a lot of resources here. Therapy now in this country is harder to get. I mean, I was amazed how hard it was to find a therapist that was trauma informed that could help me with complicated grief. But I did seek out resources like Reiki teachers and craniosacral practitioners and somatic-based body workers. And that was important to me to really keep me in my body, keep me dealing with what was coming up.
So was that since you lost your son, or was that prior to that when you started to look for that healing?
Yeah, I've been doing the healing work for decades now. I started yoga when I was in my 20s. And again, I think it was because I was in a body that hurt and it was uncomfortable and I was sensitive and I didn't like the way it felt. So I'd have to say throughout my adult life, I sought those things out. And I may have sought them out for the wrong reasons. I think I was searching to fix me, thinking I was broken, something was wrong with me, and not ever dealing again with those losses and kind of thinking it was all about me. So that rearranged itself after this death. I stopped looking at it that way. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just needing support. I'm needing other human beings, and I need to connect so that I don't isolate and get myself in the same situation as those who take their life. They go down the rabbit hole like my son did when he got so isolated.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that you've realized you don't need fixing, that you actually just need support and help. And it's you're in the place you're in because of what's happened to you, not because of you yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know for Amory's particular case, I mean, I think each suicide is different, but Amory dealt with a lot of loneliness. I mean, I think at the core of him, he was this very gentle, sensitive, soulful being of light, really. He wrote a lot of haiku poetry, and it was all about the light. I think his soul was very lonely. He just, for whatever reason, had a difficult time connecting with other humans. And then when he did reach out, he had this belief system that others didn't care about him and others didn't reach back. And he was left with deeper and deeper sense of low self-esteem. And I just look at his journey and I think if there would have been one other adult or a couple other people in his life that really came forth and really just acknowledged who he was, I think his life would have looked a lot different. And I think he would have been able to kind of get through some of this.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever heard, and it's been a long time since I heard this, but something like loneliness and depression is like the impact of this on the body is like 15 cigarettes, smoking 15 cigarettes. And I can't imagine how my body would feel after smoking 15 cigarettes, but that they compared kind of loneliness to that.
Gosh.
Have you heard that before?
No. It doesn't surprise me though. Yeah. The impact on the body. Have you felt that then? Have you felt now that you kind of look back at Emery and think, oh, is that what he was feeling? Because you're feeling some of that now. Have you felt some of that now, some of the enormity of it?
Well, yeah, that's kind of a long conversation, really, probably much more than this podcast. I have felt lonely a lot in my life, and it really wasn't until I started connecting with myself, with my shadows. Really wasn't until I really started connecting with even something higher than myself that the loneliness disappeared. So I didn't really sense loneliness after Amory passed. My loneliness was while I was raising him and actually while I was pregnant with him. So I'm just starting to look at some of that, like epigenetics and how we influence each other from the very beginning. And not that I'm guilty, but I was very sad and very lonely when I was pregnant with Amory and when he was born. And that could have had some kind of impact on him.
So it doesn't make you feel guilty, but you're just aware of the epigenetics and how we pass things ancestrally through, even if it's not in the body. I believe we just pass it through our DNA anyway, generation to generation.
Yeah. I remember when I was pregnant with Amory, I would walk around the cemeteries in the neighborhoods of North Minneapolis, and I would just say, wake up, wake up. And I would just scream at the top of my lungs for people to wake up. And this was in 1986. And Amory, that was his sort of tagline, wake up. You know, he wanted everybody to wake up. So, I mean, I don't know if they're even directly related, but they could be.
Oh, how do you do that as a mother? Because I've heard this a lot from mothers and fathers. Just how do you get through that guilt of any of that stuff where you just feel some implication of his mental health difficulties and your part as a parent? How do you get through that?
That's so interesting because I think maybe to the prior suicides in my life and having conversations at least here and there and knowing that it's nobody's fault, he was suffering. I had heard that messages throughout my life that it didn't hit me that way. And again, there's layers and layers of healing when it comes to our own personal journey. So I may not be there yet, but I also think I made a real conscious decision knowing that this was Amory's journey. This was his path, and it really didn't have much to do with me. Certainly there were things that I could have done maybe to have changed some of this. But really, Amory was a grown adult and he had made his own choices. And one of those choices in this lifetime was not to deal with the shadows and not to get help and not to talk about his emotions and to hold everything in. And he chose that, and we had conversations about that. So as much as I wanted that to be different as a parent for him, it wasn't my choice. And I think that's why I didn't really go down the guilt, because I really offered him as much as I could possibly offer him. And it didn't really matter. It ultimately wasn't what he chose.
Oh, yeah.
And that is difficult. That was hard to live with in some way. And I don't know how to articulate this, to you or the people that may be listening. In some way, I feel a sense of freedom. I mean, while he was here, I was suffering with him. You know what I mean? I saw him suffer, and I got myself sick from chronic Lyme disease because I was so enmeshed with his suffering both ways. But after he passed, there is this belief, and I'm not saying that this is true, that they're better off, that they're in a better place. And I'm not saying, again, I believe that. I'm just saying I feel better now because I don't have to be around that suffering anymore. Does that make sense? It was like this weight off my shoulders for sure. I mean, there was like, oh God, I don't have to witness.
Yeah, you can hear. Yeah, it's very emotional for you to talk about that period when you were trying to, as a mother, look after him and his mental health. And there's nothing, sounds like there's not a lot you could do to encourage or do anything, because for some reason he just couldn't do that. He couldn't find his way with making any of the changes, improvements, whatever you want to use for mental health that you could see he might need to do.
Right.
Gosh, and you can hear it's really emotional for you to think about that period. So actually this relief, again, for want of a better word, and I've heard that before, with some people it's still such a shock. The relief doesn't come, the shock, they never can quite believe that the suicide's going to happen. Even if there are attempted suicides and mental health problems, there's still a real case of, but I never thought they were actually going to do it. So sometimes people, but for you and your story it's actually brought some peace knowing he's in peace somehow, and you don't quite know. It sounds like you're not quite sure with your belief system, whether that's through heaven or, I know you've talked before about higher, there's a higher something, but maybe you're still trying to work that out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think I am. I think that is the missing piece. Like when I hear a lot of people still trying to figure out like the ins and outs of the death and the suicide. And it was interesting where my mind went. My mind went to, where is he now? And I think partially because of the Catholic upbringing, I was trying to figure it out because I was told, or the story, the narrative at that time was that they went to hell, or if best, purgatory. I mean, I literally had panic attacks over that, thinking that my son was in purgatory. And again, I am sorting out what heaven, hell, all of that, but what happens to the soul after they leave. And because they chose this, or not really chose it, but because it was a violation.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that either. But anyway, what really does happen to them? And I'm still trying to sort that out.
Definitely. Yeah, I can hear that, especially with the Catholic ideas of sin and violation of life, which is a tricky thing to say, isn't it? But it is a violent act. I think a lot of us struggle with that, the knowingness of the violent act that took them. And I think that's part of our sorting through. And like you say, a lot of our sorting through in our heads is trying to make sense of all that and shuffle our belief system around. It sounds like you're shuffling yours around a bit in order to support you to move forward. That's what it sounds like you're doing. Right.
I had to. That I was really going down a downward spiral. It was really making me deeply afraid and anxious. So I actually ended up, I had not gone inside of a Catholic church for decades, but I had heard the local Catholic priest in our community was incredible. And he had gone through several suicides in the last couple of years of teens and families in our community. So I ended up reaching out to him. And that was one of the best things that I did. I think that was one of the real resilient, there was a lot of forgiveness in that act. And he was wonderful. He affirmed that purgatory is no longer part of the Catholic language. And he apologized on behalf of Catholicism. He called my mother. He wrote my mother a note. I mean, he went overboard in terms of repairing what had happened to us when I was little with my father and the Catholic Church. So, and he totally affirmed that both Craig, my former husband who had passed away, and Amory went right to the light. He said, Kathy, they went right to the light. And he was really instrumental in my healing about that.
Oh, Gosh, a welcome. Yeah, welcome thing to hear from a priest. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you say your upbringing then was very Catholic,
Yeah.
but then you also said that you've had a lot of talk around suicide growing up, that maybe your dad, was that about your dad? How was your dad talked about in childhood? Because that's a really helpful thing. I think people that have lost fathers, mothers, partners, husbands, wives to suicide, not quite sure how to communicate, what to tell the children, when to tell the children. So I think to have your perspective as a child growing up, what it was like for you, and maybe what you wish could have happened or would have helped maybe as well would be good to hear.
Yeah. And trying to do this without blame.
Yeah.
Because, again, there was a different narrative at that time. So I had worked through a lot of things that happened to me as a child that I wished hadn't happened.
Mm.
So I was 4 years old. My mother was a young mother. She had had 4 children. So I had an older brother and 2 younger sisters. And we were raised in the Catholic Church. So my dad was very Catholic, and his mother went to church every day, and my dad went to church. And we didn't really ever get to hear the story about his life. But the one thing that stuck with me about my dad is that his friends and the people that knew him continued to tell people that he was one of the happiest people that they ever knew, which is so odd to me, because that was the piece that I couldn't figure out. How do happy people decide, anyway, to die by suicide? I was like, really? Well, I don't get that one. We did have, my grandparents lived next door, and we had aunts and uncles around. So we did have people around, but because my mother was so young and really ill prepared for this, back then they gave her a drug to help her cope. I think she spent a lot of time in her bedroom. So she really wasn't around. So we were kind of, our care was managed by other family members.
Yeah, gosh.
And then, of course, my mother had to go to school and go to work. And so, again, not only did my father leave, but in many respects, my mother did too. And that makes sense to me. I mean, even after losing my son, only parts of myself are available to people. That's just the reality is I have to be here for me. I mean, I'm only available to a limited number of people. So I understand that now, but I didn't, of course, understand that as a 4-year-old, where some of my needs maybe weren't being met. But I'd have to say my mother, the takeaway from that is that she did go back to school, that she did become a nurse, and she just buckled up those pants and did what she did to put food on the table. And in many respects, I mean, you have to admire somebody that did that, said, I have to grow up.
Yeah, young mother with 4 children back then, to cope with the loss of a husband to suicide. In a Catholic environment where you can imagine what she was going through, really can't even imagine it. And I think we always judge the past through our lens of life now, and we can't. We've got to almost take our lens back to what we can imagine it would have been like then. But there was no talk of mental health or suicide or remotely the well-being of our emotions back then, was there? So yeah, you're talking about, I mean, I don't know how many years you're talking about, just to put it into context. People can't see how old you are, I guess.
Okay, so I'm 59. So what would that be, about 55 years ago? So my dad died in 1966.
Yeah.
I doubt there were very many resources back then. And again, I think my mother was too distraught, and she had family. She had a lot of family around. So I think that there wasn't really this need like there was for me. I just had this desire to okay, Kathy, go now, take care of this now, go get support now. There's lots of resources for you. And, I've been so humbled by the resources around. You have to dig a little bit, but they're definitely out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, to continue on with that story, I just think it definitely had a great impact on me. I mean, it carved out the rest of my life, and it shaped who I am. But I would have to say, if I could go back and wave a magic wand, one of the things I would have really preferred is that people were able to talk about that. And again, I look at my situation now and I'm like, wow, we don't even talk about it now. So, the difficulty in that, the real difficulty in talking about it. So I struggle with that with my own daughter, my own family. So.
Yeah, now talking about suicide, or talking about them, or is it's a bit different, isn't it?
All of the above.
All of it. Yeah. Geez.
All of the above. Again, my heart breaks because I don't really, unless I go to therapy or in a support group, and even the support group that I go to, you have a few minutes to kind of, do your spiel. There's nowhere I can really share the story of Amory or talk about him or talk about Craig. And so I am putting together a book of Amory's haiku and some of his photographs that he's taken around the world. And my hope is that I learned something called the continuing bond. You know that term? And so what has been intuitive all along for me is to continue on this relationship. That yes, the physical body is gone and, they're not here, but that doesn't mean my relationship with them has to go away. And I've continued that from day one. Even though I may not hear back from them, I continue to talk to them. I continue to keep them in my awareness and in my presence. And not just like normal, like just talking to them. And that's helpful. And so I think this book will be a platform for me to really just say, this is who Amory was. He was a really gifted, talented young man, and he dealt with some demons and some shadows, but that's part of the picture.
Yeah. So it's sometimes often too painful to literally talk about him, maybe your daughter and other people in the family. It brings up a lot of emotions, doesn't it? And we're not quite sure if it's going to upset the other people either, do we? So we don't want to bring it into the conversation sometimes because we're protecting them.
Exactly.
There's the whole mixed bag, isn't there, to why we don't want to drop it into the conversation.
And I think we process grief differently, and I can see how my daughter and I have really processed this very differently. It could be an age thing, and it could be just who we are. So really respecting boundaries, and it's been kind of a delicate manner of how to navigate this with family members.
Yeah.
I'm pretty open with community members, and I'm in a new community. I moved myself from long-term friendships to not knowing anybody. So I think one of the skill sets that I do have is able to get resources and able to network and get involved in communities fairly quickly. And again, I did that. Even in my grief, I thought, this is really important, Kathy. You need to do this.
So when you went looking for support groups or this kind of thing, really, yeah, other communities where you can share.
Yeah. I go back and look at my emails, and I had a scattering of emails. I mean, just like, oh my God, I was just like research. And then half of them I probably didn't even contact, but I did reach out quite a bit to a lot of different people and organizations.
Great. Yeah. So grief changed your life from your son in terms of you moving because of that to be near your daughter or something. There's life it made you move. Was it because of his death? It wasn't like a choice.
It just felt like the perfect timing. My daughter was out here in the Pacific Northwest, so I really wanted to be close with her.
Okay.
She was my very first priority.
Yeah.
And I had some things going on in that community, and I had some long-term friends, but I was already in a transitional period after my divorce. I had moved to California and lived out in California near my sister for some time. And then I came back to check in with Amory. So I lived back in Wisconsin just to be around him for a while. And I'm really glad I did. That was a really healing period for me to spend that time with him.
Yeah. Okay. So it was the right time as well as felt like the right thing to do to be near your daughter. Yeah. Do we just go back to when you were a child and really, because you've brought it back again in terms of maybe you're processing it a bit differently than your daughter because you've got the experience with suicide. So did anyone ever say that your dad had actually taken his own life, or was that a silent kind of just knowing from very young?
Very young. It was kind of complicated because I don't really think anybody really ever sat us down and shared what had happened. So we were very involved in it. I remember being at my grandparents' house and being on the stairs and hearing people crying. And I vaguely remember the ambulance and things like that. I don't think, again, there was much direct communication at any point in our life what happened. So what happens is that there's just stories that float around. And I don't want to bring this up, but people can be kind of harsh in what they say to young children, like, oh yeah, your dad took his own life and it's because of you. And I mean, there were some really harsh comments made by some family members that I struggled with for years and years. So without ever hearing the direct impact or ever hearing who my father was. I mean, I think my mother's choice was to kind of get rid of all of his belongings and not talk about him again, not bring him up. And I don't know, that's not the way that I'm doing it, not the way that I think is healthy for me. But at the time for her, that's what she needed to do. She needed to go on with her life and sort of push that aside.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I think, I've heard that's good advice, though, for parents thinking, what do I do? Is just keep talking about them, have pictures as much as you can. But again, it's your well-being as well. So if pictures up are difficult for you, it might be hard to do that for the children. But even in the face of suicide, I think that's when we're more likely not to, if someone dies of another cause, we might be more likely to share their anniversaries together or talk about them or bring them in every night when we say goodnight or whatever works for you and your family. But I think I've heard that that's sort of helpful for children to continue those bonds, like you say, the continuing bonds aspect. Parents almost need to try and do that for them, because especially at the age of 4, you wouldn't have a clue that you need to try and do that, or why you should do that. Or sometimes, again, a young child might try and protect mum or dad from sharing can we talk about dad? Mum probably wouldn't want to do that, because a caring, sensitive child might not want to do that because mum might be upset by that. So again, it kind of leaves the responsibility on the parents. But
right.
When you're going through your own grief, that's the complicated nature, isn't it, of it all? How do we do that and keep talking about them whilst we're going through our own complicated emotions around the death? It's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, you hear that when people die, it is sad. But what is even more sad, again, is that you don't talk about it. There's kind of stops communication. It stops people relating. It stops those living connections. I have a friend who lost her husband about the same time that I lost Amory and Craig. And she has 2 young children. I think her daughter is 6 and her son might be 8. Maybe they were a little younger when it happened. And I just saw her parent those children, and it just was so beautiful to watch her navigate as a single mom. She definitely included Corey, her husband. She brought him in a lot. She invited the kids to say, what would dad do? And let's go do that. And I mean, it was so inclusive. Like, he was still there, very much a part of their life. Mm-hmm. They talked about him a lot. So that feels really healthy to me. That feels like a good thing for kids. And I suppose it has, the age and being careful about not using methods or talking about too much detail.
Yeah.
Just how are you feeling? And, do you ever think about him? And very simple conversations.
Yeah, keeping it simple, just the simple conversations about them, keeping them alive in the child's mind, really, isn't it?
Right.
The best you can. Because again, you heard stories of, which I've heard before, stories of the sense of it's your fault, dad did what he did. And that just, if an adult says that to you as a child, gosh, how much unconscious processing did that take to pick apart and put right, if you like, as an adult?
Yeah.
To look back on and think, actually, that wasn't about me. But that's really hard to do, isn't it? But you heard stories as well of mental health. You said very early on that you had stories of, he was struggling with his mental health. Did that come about your dad? Did people share that kind of stuff with you?
No, in fact, there's still belief that nothing was really wrong with him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like they said he had mental health, depression. There's no talk about that to this day, that he was struggling with anything. I think we had heard that he had lost his job, and that was part of it. And I know when men don't have work, they definitely have some issues. Men like to work. Men like to provide for their family. So I'm quite certain that he had some internal struggles that people just didn't see. Sometimes it is easy, it is hard to see some of that, it's not quite obvious at times.
Gosh, no, especially as a child. It's just life, isn't it? When you're a child, life is what it is.
Yeah.
You don't know any different, do you? So pleased that you found your own way to heal that. And it sounds as if that did kind of not prepare you. That's not the right word either, because nothing can prepare you for Emery, can it? And Craig, but you had a relationship with suicide before. There's something different about your story that sort of resonates a lot with me like that, as if you'd already developed a bit of a relationship with suicide. So when it happened, although, you can hear a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil, but I don't know, just not in the same way as other stories. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, it does. And again, there's a language, there's a familiarity with it. And there's also like, wow, this didn't work back then, so try this. I think when it's new to you, you're kind of blowing in the wind. You're just like, whoa. And I've sort of had a grounded perspective, like, wow, this didn't work and this didn't work. So you have more choices.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah. So ignoring it didn't work. So this time I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to go to support groups, go on a podcast, talk about it.
Yeah, I might be a little overzealous, I think. It's like, okay, I'm going to do the opposite. That ping pong, it's like, there definitely is a balance. And I think my daughter, is a gift for me. There is like, Mom, I have the rest of my life to deal with this, and I can take my time. And I had more sense of urgency towards this, only that I have had some chronic health issues. And I know that if I didn't deal with it, these issues would have compounded.
Okay.
Yeah, I scheduled grief. Like my calendar was like 10 o'clock grief therapy, 11 o'clock dance therapy.
Oh, wow. Really gone for it.
Yeah, I really did. And then I backed away and I said, you know what, Kathy, this is a little out of balance. You need to take care of yourself and find some other things, that aren't just about grief, aren't just about loss, aren't just about processing this. Just go out, go for long walks, call a friend, go out to dinner, just do normal things.
Yeah, normal things. Oh gosh, yeah, which is really tricky to do sometimes. Get back to some sort of normality is very difficult, isn't it? Because life doesn't feel quite normal, but you have to find some sort of normality, don't you?
I think so. And even in this challenging time where nothing really feels normal anywhere around the globe, I know what feels, and I don't even like the word normal, but I know what feels good to me. And I nourished those things. I nourished all the things that made me feel good, no matter what was going on around me, no matter what the circumstances or what the barriers were. I continued to feed my soul and let my soul know that it was okay, that I'm okay.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Good for me. What's good for me? Yeah. Not about being normal, is it? It's what was good for me.
Right.
And you were mindfully doing that. You noticed you were doing the grief 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, you had it all scheduled in to do the grief work, and you mindfully noticed maybe that's too extreme. Yeah. So there was a bit of mindfulness in there, awareness of yourself, looking at behavior and then adjusting it if necessary. But what was good for you? Love that.
I was also in a transition in my life with my career and my work in the world too. So I was trying to negotiate at the same time grieving. What do I do with this? What is my mission now? I was like already 2 steps ahead of myself. Like, okay, I got to go out in the world and do this now. So I really had to rein that back in and say, not now, at least.
Gosh.
Not now. And really look at the reasons and examine my intention for that. Like, instead of really wanting to go out and help all people and who are suffering from this, really take care of yourself now. You do your work. You do your own homework first. And then if something organically grows out of that place where you feel this desire to go out and do something, then, but I think I was trying to figure out my path and my purpose and my profession at the same time. And it wasn't working.
God, I love that too. Taking the time for you.
So many of us don't have that time. I mean, I was on these support groups and all these people are back at work and they're thrown into families. And like my mother having 4 children to raise, I do have time, and I did take the time. And I wish that our culture gave people the time to grieve. 2 things: time to grieve and then space to grieve. A space. Like for me, it was nature, but some kind of community space where, I don't know if you know Francis Weller's work, but grief is a community thing. It's not a solo thing. It's a community thing. And we're missing that piece somehow with the COVID too. Boy, that got chopped out. I mean, I created a service, a Zoom service in a week, and had about 150 to 200 people on a Zoom service in less than a week. But so I was interacting and grieving with people on the computer. And that's been my grieving process, actually. I mean, Zoom grief groups and Zoom everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to find our community that way, don't we? Because of COVID. But also, I think the world makes it more accessible then to communicate like this across the world. If it wasn't for that, how would we be talking now to you have heard of me and the podcast to then come on and share your story? That could then, how many people listen to your story? And then, it's like butterfly effect, isn't it? And the community just grows and grows. And the community nobody wants to be in, but we're here. And so many of us are wanting to support each other in that community, which is what you've got the drive to do. And you're just waiting for the path to unfold in front of you whilst you grieve rather than fighting for it.
Yeah. And I think we will get those impulses. I'm pretty sure you probably did. Just, okay, now's the time. I want to do this.
Yeah.
The clarity wasn't there initially. It was just like, oh my God, I got to go help people. It's like, no.
Yeah.
The one thing I did, and your viewers won't see this, but I would like to share it with you. I created this little poster, and I did that right away for myself to really keep my focus on what was important. And I don't know if people really do that, especially if you're in shock or deep grief, or I just wanted to have a focus. So I kept that in my bedroom, and I looked at that all the time about what was important to me.
Okay.
And everything else I just kind of had to let go. Just let everything go, and really dance was important to move my body and just let my body start to move. And nature, I think I said, was important to me. But what I realized wasn't important, because I was like a go, got to do, got to make the list, is the real importance for rest and sleep and just letting my body decompress. I didn't really know that I needed that until I just hit like exhaustion. Really couldn't do much more. So that part of it, again, even though I wasn't aware of it, became really helpful for my body to just slow down.
Again, so you mindfully noticed you were going to the point of exhaustion, which I think there's a process of grief in that. Doing, definitely. people start running and all sorts, don't they? Like I did, just to do something. To sit still for me was too painful without doing something. But again, that's okay as long as you notice when you're getting exhausted and step back and take time out. So just to explain that, what you had was just pictures, isn't it, with words. So you made a collage, if you like. Of just...
Yeah, and you can do it anyway with crayons or anything, but just sort of key words and pictures for me of what was important to me. Rejuvenation, dance, nature, connection, and rest. Creativity is on there for me, and that's something that I really haven't done anything about yet, but I really think that that would be another avenue, whether writing or storytelling or some type of creative outlet. I haven't found that yet, and I think that would be helpful for me to just kind of get things out through the art.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, suppose for me it would be dance, because I like to move, so it would be a version of dance.
Yeah, that's creative, isn't it? I love that. It's talks about self-care. Your sort of poster for the wall is all things that you love that are good for you. Again, once you realised you need to just do what's good for you. And that poster is just a constant reminder of what is good for me in terms of all these different things that can be different for everybody. And that poster is a reminder every day to look after yourself, isn't it? What do I need today? And I think that's crucial when we start to realise that that's where the future lies, if you like. That's where sometimes a lot of the stories change tact, when suddenly people have realised, oh, what about me? I'm still here. My loved one isn't, but how do I move forward and love me now and take care of me now? That's when things start to seem in the stories to improve, when people realise they're lovable, they need to love themselves, move forward and look after themselves. It sounds like that's what you did or you're doing.
I think so. And I think, again, it's not to be superficial or anything, but it's helpful to have positive focuses. In my particular case, it would have been easy to spiral down thinking about the things I could have, should have, all of those things. But Amory, I did receive one gift after the day after my son passed. I was curled up in a ball sobbing. It was 6:30 in the morning in a city park, and I was listening to his favorite band, Boombox. And I just, I was non-functional. I mean, I just don't know where. I just was non-functional. And as loud as a microphone, I heard him speak. I mean, I heard him say, "Mom, stop crying. Get up and dance." He said, "This is your time to go live your life and do what you came here to do." And I'm looking around thinking I'm half crazy. I thought, this isn't my voice, because I wouldn't be telling myself this right now. But it was a gift. It was truly a gift, whether it came from Amory or who, that it was my mantra to live by. And I've since changed that. Like when he said, "Don't cry," I think what he was meaning is just go live your life. Go do what you want to do. This is your time now. And I don't know if this is going to make sense either, but somehow through his death, I was able to live. I was able to, I think I don't want to share too much of the story about what happened, but it could have easily been me. I could have easily been the one who was gone, and I didn't. And I do think something really shifted in my being, that I am alive. I'm grateful to be alive. And what am I going to do with my life? What is it now that I want to do? And then do it. And Amory was a big teacher that way. He lived with no regrets. I mean, he traveled all over the world and lived passionately. He had as a mission as a child to live a life of no regrets. And he taught me that. I think that was his parting message, is go live your life. Don't have any regrets.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. What a gift to hear that when you were at the depths where you could have stayed. I'm sure you didn't just jump up and start dancing, but it took time to probably...
Oh, I did. I actually did.
Oh, wow.
I'm quite obedient when it comes to things like that, because, it's like, was this a message from the universe? So I was like, okay, I will. And I cried and I danced, and I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown, but I did it. It felt really good to move my body. It did. So.
Wow. What a gift. Oh, I think that's a really lovely place.
I guess I would have to say, if anybody were to give me any kind of advice around that, it's you just have to find your medicine. You really have to find what is that medicine? What does help get me through this? So different for everybody.
Yeah.
But people know what feeds their souls. And to put yourself first. I know that's really hard for people to do. I think because sometimes we feel like we're selfish or live in a narcissistic world, but it's okay at this time to put yourself as a priority and take care of definitely your basic needs.
Gosh, if there wasn't a better time, it's now, when you've lost someone to suicide, for sure.
And beyond.
Yeah, if we're going to do it now. Gosh. Oh.
Yeah, well, this was lovely. I'm really appreciating how easy it is to have a conversation. I want to do my own podcast, and I'm so nervous about what do you say? How do you say it? So thank you for doing this. And
yeah, I hope you do, because you've got a lot to offer. I do hope you do start a podcast, so that people can hear everything you've learned, because you've clearly learned a lot that we can't just cover in 1/2 hour, 1 hour podcast for sure. So I hope that does come out. People need to keep an eye on you, don't they, on your name, and in a while, once you're ready, when organically that comes. And I'm so grateful for you being here. You've given us a lot today and we really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to say before we finish to leave people with?
I really don't. I think I said a lot. The key word for me again through this whole thing has been loneliness, and really if people could reach out and connect. That feels really important during these days, to continue to find ways to connect, and even if it is by Zoom. I found it really healing to just even me take the step. If people weren't reaching out to me, I started to feel a little bitter and a little resentful, and I'm like, pick up the phone, Kathy. Just pick up the phone. You'll feel a lot better after you do. So I did.
Oh, wow. Strong lady. Can people connect with you anyway?
I don't have any way to connect with me now. I mean, they can find me on Facebook, I suppose, Kathleen Marie Allen. I'm not there yet about what's next for me. I am working on a book, and it's called The Blue Hour, Haiku and Poetry by Amory Hayden Tarr. And hopefully that's going to come out by November. And again, that's just because I want to share Amory's story.
Mm-hmm.
He had so much beautiful haiku poetry and so many beautiful photographs that I felt important to put that out as a legacy project.
Yeah.
I guess that's another thing I just say is, wow, it's really important. My daughter and I created many, many ways to honor and celebrate them, from putting their ashes at the top of high mountaintops to going out in the middle of the ocean, and just find ways to keep honoring them and celebrating them.
Wow.
And this is one, the legacy. This feels like a nice contribution.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure people would have got a lot out of today's conversation. So thank you so much, so much. Namaste.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's nice talking to you.
Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it, and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.